World Patient Safety Day approaching, we are putting the spotlight on an issue that affects around half the population, women's health. Studies showing time and time again that women tend to live longer than men, but spend a larger portion of our lives in poor health. According to McKinsey, women spend 25% more time in poor health compared to men, and more than half of this health gap occurs during their working years. So addressing this disparity could boost global economy by an estimated $1 trillion annually by 2040. And today we're joined by Christina Ioannidis, who is the CEO of Aquitude. We are discussing why women experience poorer outcomes in many areas of healthcare and what can be done to close that gap. How are you, Christina?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Helen?
I feel like you're asking this in a pointed way as we talk about women's health. Yes, I mean, I would say that I'm blessed in the sense that I have access to amazing healthcare here in the UAE. I have the confidence to reach out and speak to great professionals when I feel like something might be off. But I know that so many women are not afforded those privileges. They haven't got the time or the resources, the access to get them out of situations that they might just think it is normal to always be in pain. I will always feel this way. I'm sick of coming up against wall after wall of so-called experts who don't have the answers to my problems. So I think it's really important to have this conversation, to be honest. Christina, why do you think that there is such a significant health disparity between men and women? What are the factors driving this gap?
Would you allow me to actually give a little bit more context as well? Because
Definitely.
I think this is also very revealing. In the UK, there was research which was done recently, and in 2022. And what it identified is basically we need more women's health strategies. There's actually a women's health ambassador within the government. So there's a whole focus in the UK, and I'm using this as an example because it's not something that's been really talked about in many other countries. But what they identified during that big piece of research, because they actually did an inquest in it, 4 out of 5 women felt unheard when discussing their health issues. And it's not just your typical, you would imagine it's just your typical gynecological things, but no, it was right across the board. So part of the challenge, and I'll come to answer your question in a second, is that there is a disparity largely because women have different symptoms or different types of ailments that are different to men.
Which means many doctors will have been trained in identifying these symptoms to reach a diagnosis of this issue without taking into consideration that half of the population might not display those symptoms.
Yes, and again, just to be very, very, because I know you had a doctor here earlier, just to be very respectful to the medical profession, it is not their fault.
No, of course, you're taught what you're taught.
You're taught what you're taught, exactly. But now is, and this is why I'm delighted we're having this conversation, and there's a little bit more globally now, there's a lot more focus on this, or a spotlight on the topic, because now we can really unearth some of the disparities. I mean, we have different lung capacity to men. We have different heart mechanics. So we suffer differently. And we also have, for example, different responses to vaccines.
Well, we've got different responses to medications. And it's only shockingly recently that we've actually started to do testings of medications on women. I mean, have you read that book, Invisible Women?
Of course.
Okay.
It's my Bible, without being religious.
Can you explain, for anyone that hasn't read it, why it's such an important bit of research and work?
I think what's really fascinating about Caroline Perez Criado, I think is her name, who wrote that book, is that she's a data scientist, and she looked at a number of industries, not just healthcare, and looked at what are the gender disparities and where are women present or not present, as the case may be. And that's where, when you look at the whole chapter on health, it is just mind-boggling. I have really absorbed it all, and it's for me a realization as to why we need to advocate more on our own behalf, which is why I'm here, Helen.
Absolutely. If you want details of this book, send me the word book. It's called Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. We're talking about health today, but the book looks at workplace. It looks at things like, crash test dummies in cars, for example, and, why countless examples. It's a really good read for men I should say, as well as women. I'm curious then, you just said the word about being unheard, overlooked in healthcare settings. What advice would you give to women to better advocate for themselves and make sure that their concerns are taken seriously?
Okay, number one is education. So we need to educate ourselves. And I know you and I have had loads of conversations around some of the typical ailments. And in fact, we were having a conversation about something that has affected me. And I know you know someone who's been affected by things like endometriosis, which is one of those...
I'm happy to talk about it. I literally went to the doctor this morning to have a checkup, and she was like, Helen, I think you've got endometriosis. And I was like... Well, that's unexpected because I haven't had any fertility problems. I haven't had any pain. She was like, yeah, but looking at what I'm looking at, this is what you have. And I'm 42 years old, and this is the first time it's ever been mentioned.
So this is a great example of things going unnoticed. Not because people are not good at what they do. It's just that we do have some very bizarre things that may happen only to our gender, and there may not exactly be the right tests and investigations undertaken to really find them. Endometriosis can be a bit subtle. This is one of the reasons why I don't want to be too focused on that. But for example, 80% of autoimmune conditions, which endometriosis is one of them, affects women. But those are the conditions where there's very little research still. So things like celiac disease, things like lupus, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. These are very, very often affecting women.
What about things in the mental health space? We've seen a huge increase in the number of women in their 30s, 40s, 50s being diagnosed with ADHD and autism, especially post-pandemic, when often those women were mums who were looking at their children's symptoms, and like friends of mine are suddenly hyper-focused and going, oh, this is actually me. Because the way that the women were displaying some of this was not necessarily the textbook that a psychologist or a psychiatrist would be looking for. So mental health,
big one, and I think I'm so delighted you bring it up, because one of the big challenges for women is the difference in metabolic syndrome. So they have a different response. Because of our hormones, we have a different response to the way our body functions, and it metabolizes and it creates energy. And so for women, and research has shown this, metabolic dysfunction includes things like insulin resistance, cholesterol, elevated body mass index, whereas for men it's much more about triglycerides and hypertension. So those are different symptoms. What also tends to happen with us, and you said the interesting word, mums, when women go through reproduction and they have children, very often they get gestational diabetes. And if that's not dealt with, and diabetes is as a result of insulin resistance, you basically have too much insulin and your body goes, I don't know what to do with it, right? So this is where we need to be aware of, maybe this is as a result of the gestational diabetes or other factors like increased weight gain that then impact their metabolism, that then impacts their mental health. Because do you want to flog another book?
Yeah, go on. I love selling books. What we're selling?
This one is Lisa Mosconi's. Obviously, XX Brain. She's now come out with Menopause Brain.
Oh God, I'm adding to cart immediately. Interesting.
Yes, so Menopause Brain, and she talks about how the brain changes as a result of women going through the menopausal transition. I know you didn't ask me about menopause, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because post having children, mental health issues, very often linked to hormonal imbalances, changes, which then as we go through menopause, you see the mental change in itself. Long answer.
No, but now I've got some reading.
More reading.
Joining us in studio, we have got coach, speaker, trainer, the CEO of Aquitude, Christina Ioannis, is with us today. If you want details of her, or of course the books we're talking about, do reach out. We're talking about the huge disparity in the way women and men are treated in healthcare. I'd love to hear from you. A message here from Elizabeth saying, yes, it took me years to get a diagnosis because, these are her words, not mine, my crusty old doctor in the States didn't seem to care about women's health. Coming here was a revelation. Up next, we're going to be talking about what steps both individuals and, yes, healthcare systems can take to make more equitable and effective health outcomes for women, especially as we approach World Patient Safety Day. If you want to share your thoughts on this, 4001. If you want details of the books we're talking about, send me the word book and I will send you some links.
More of Afternoons with Helen Farmer is coming up next
on the UAE's #1 talk radio.
And we're going to be talking about women in leadership and education in particular. So if you want the advice from those in the know, stay with us. And I want to hear from you on 4001, your #1 customer service pet peeves. What really annoys you when you're on a website or in a store? We're talking about how brands sell to us emotionally. And also, what really is good customer care in 2024? Go on, have a rant. We're talking about the significant health disparity between men and women ahead of World Patient Safety Day approaching. Joining us, the CEO of Aquitude, health coach, speaker and more, Christina Ioannidis is with us today. And I have to say, you're such an amazing advocate for women. You know, people come to you to boost their careers, but also to build confidence in how they move around the world, how they communicate professionally, personally. We're talking health now as well. With the health coaching, what's keeping you busy? What are people coming to you concerned about, Christina?
Yeah, well, it just so happens that a lot of the people that I know and interact with are in that challenging time like I am. I'm a proud 51-year-old woman who feels better.
Who looks
now.
fabulous.
Thank you.
You do.
Feel better now than I did in my mid-40s. So very much the kind of perimenopausal, menopausal transition. A lot of the challenges there are around, as I talked about, metabolic syndrome, and particularly around the piece on insulin resistance. So what happens to me, and I don't wish this on anybody, but a lot of people, a lot of women are seeing at that early 40s, mid 40s, just moving into the 50s, putting on weight, not being able to shift it. Maybe in my case, it was skin tags, terrible sleeping, anxiety. In fact, you talked about McKinsey research. Deloitte research has shown that women are actually now burning out more than men.
Well, stay with us for tomorrow, 2:00. We're speaking to Dr. Claire Plumbley, who's written a book on how to avoid burnout. So if this is you, 2:00 tomorrow, we're bringing in the author, the doctor herself. Let's talk about the different life and health stages that women go through, because you know, we talk a lot about, we've been talking about menopause now, but we also, you know, puberty was really, really kind of on my mind right now with two young girls in the household. But can you kind of talk us through the definite chapters?
So I love the way you call it chapters, and it is in fact chapters, because let's just start with men. Much easier than women. Very simply, it's moving into adulthood and then puberty and then adulthood, and then they actually go through what's called andropause, which is a slowing down on their testosterone production. For us women, we've got, like you said, we've got puberty. So this is when our hormones wake up and we actually start secreting, let's call it, more estrogen, and our cycles start shifting with estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, because we also do have testosterone. And then we move into the reproductive years. So once we've got our menses, the whole reason why we're on this planet, even though we love to work and all the rest of it, is to reproduce, right? So we go through this whole phase, which is what is our maximal reproductive age. And then we go through the shift where we're transitioning between being able to have children to not, which is defined by various stages. One is perimenopause, which is where your hormones start shifting, fluctuating somehow abnormally. Why? Because your ovaries that produce estrogen are actually starting to run out of eggs, and they're just saying, I'm out of here, right?
And then the definition, I think a lot of people are still quite confused about the definition of menopause as a start of a chapter, is when you haven't had a period in a year.
Basically.
Exactly.
Menopause. So I'm actually in that phase where you're going through moving into menopause, but that could take up to 15 years. Jeez. And so all these things that we're talking about, which is why it's great you're also talking about burnout. We've got a lot of stress. We've got, especially at that mid-career point.
Well, it's mid-career. You've most likely got kids. And probably parents to think about as well.
Absolutely.
That sandwich situation.
Absolutely. So you add all of this all of these stressors in, which impact you immensely. I mean, we've been talking about brain fog, and that's a mental health issue, forgetfulness, anxiety, sleep disorders. I mean, they're all part and parcel of the shift. And then the last phase, which we were talking about, what's the life cycle? The last part of the cycle is postmenopause. And that's where you get women who have come out the other side, who still have obviously a lot of years to live, because now we're living longer.
Well, this is what I always find quite interesting, because that was always the case. It was like you have your you go through menopause and then you die. You know, historically, it might be like 55 and your life expectancy is 60 and you're like, oh, and that's it. Whereas now you could have decades post-menopause. So it's really important for women in that chapter to continue to look after themselves emotionally and physically.
It is. And, the biggest challenges in terms of our health in the latter part of our life, actually, the challenges start occurring in that transition phase. So if we do not look after ourselves in these transition phases of peri and menopause, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Long-term disability. So women are more likely than men to suffer with long-term disability. Men die faster. I'm not being rude, so sorry to the gentlemen who are listening.
Factually, they do.
They have heart attacks. But women live longer. They don't have so many in the same issues as men, but they have higher amount of osteoporosis, which is as a result also of
We're going to run out of time, but I was just listening to an interview with Kate Winslet this morning, and she was talking about why she exercises. And she was like, yeah, of course, I've had roles that I need to be aware of, and I was wearing tight clothes in the regime, and but she was like, I exercise to avoid injury. She was like, I want to be able to give my 10-year-old piggybacks. I want to be able to carry my own luggage. I just want to be a functioning, healthy woman for as long as possible. Christina, we have run out of time.
No.
I know. It's okay. You're coming again soon.
Yes.
In the meantime, though, for anyone that does want to talk to you about health coaching, about speaking, about, giving their career a boost, I think a lot of people are in that kind of September back to me headspace. What's the best way of getting in touch?
Instagram. So I'm at Christina Ioannidis _official. The Ioannidis is IOA. Just to confuse
Do you know
people.
what? Just send me the word link. Should we do that?
Let's
send me the word link and I'll send you Christina's details.
Can I add one more plug?
Go for it.
So I've just published a book called Reboot, Rebuild, Reconquer.
Mabruk, Christina.
And thank you. Maybe a very good resource for women in midlife, because I'm doing a lot of that. So it's actually looking at how when you go through that second chapter of your life.
Well, come back and talk about that soon.
Let's do that.
Okay, I'd love that. Christina, thank you so much.
Thank
Always
you,
an
Helen.
absolute pleasure. If you want details of Christina, send me the word link and I will send you her Instagram. Also, got the books ready to go if you want to have a bit of a book club. We were talking about Invisible Women and also the menopause brain. Gentlemen, this includes you. You need to know what's going on as well. Here are your headlines.